At the end of the day, it's the tenacious ones who are still working. I know it sounds terrible, but I'm just going to tell you the data don't lie. If you are able to take no, oh, your auditions suck. Oh, your script is so bad. Whatever it is, like if you're able to take no, learn something from it and just continue on and go, well, not today, but I'll make it better tomorrow. You'll end up winning far better than someone who's really amazing.
Welcome to an inspirational people interview on the Share Life podcast. Today I'm speaking with productivity and remote work expert Steven Puri, founder of the Sukha company. Steven, say hello.
Jason, we're going to have some fun today.
Thanks for joining us and sharing your life with us today. Steven is a studio executive and producer on films from Die Hard to The Wolverine. Steven had to learn how to inspire a broad range of teams. When he moved into the tech industry, he discovered a whole new set of remote work challenges, which led him to study the great minds of productivity. And now he speaks on remote work, leading virtual teams, and healthy productivity. So, Steven, if you want to add anything to that, go ahead and just tell us about you and your story.
A little bit of funny color that we'll fill in some of the details. So I was raised in Virginia, the son of two engineers at IBM. Okay. My mom was a systems programmer. My father was a hardware engineer designing logic chips, essentially CPUs. And so when I was little, I was a little code monkey. I went to US.
What year is this?
This is in the late 80s.
Okay, so late 80s, you're typing away on your parents' computers while they're supposed to be working.
Exactly. And go to USC, where it has a great cinema TV school. So a lot of my buddies in the dorm were, aspiring Lucases and Spielbergs and stuff like that, right? So really friendly, we go see movies, do a thing. I was studying my stuff, and I happened to be, and this is luck of the draw, I'm telling you, I happened to be in LA when film went digital, and I happened to be able to speak both languages. I had enough friends that were creatives where I could talk to a director or producer, writer confidently in their language, but also turn around and talk to an engineer about, well, how would we do this digitally? And that enabled my career to accelerate very quickly, where I was like, oh, I should capitalize on this. This is fun. I'm working in film, but I'm sort of doing some engineering stuff. And I ended up producing digital visual effects. So in other words, digitizing images and saying, how can we make something cool? I ended up producing the digital visual effects for Independence Day. We won the Academy Award for that, which was a great thing for all our careers. And that's how I started my first company with the director and producer of Independence Day. We became friends, and we said, we're going to do a lot of these big summer movies together. Ended up working on Jim Cameron's True Lies, did Fincher's Seven, worked on Braveheart, worked on Woody Allen's film, Jim Jarmusch's film, a lot of stuff. And it was kind of an interesting awakening for me of like that whole world of film, which growing up in Virginia, as a kid in Virginia with two parents who are engineers, you don't really think a lot about what that career could be. You know what I mean? So that was like a big left turn in my life of like, oh, I think I'm going to go do this little engineering film thing. And that led me to go, well, what if I actually did become a studio executive? And worked hard. Again, a lot of lucky breaks. Let's not trivialize the amount of luck there is in the world, right? But worked hard. Was an executive vice president at DreamWorks for Kurtzman and Orsi, who were two great writers, and vice president at Fox, where I ran some of the summer franchises like the Die Hard franchise, Wolverine franchise, 24, things like that. And then had a moment where I was like, I think it was on Die Hard 5, I was kind of had a moment of, I'm going to end up being 40, 50, 60 years old, being the guy making Die Hard 7 and like, okay, kids, daddy's got to go make Die Hard 7 to pay for your college. You know what I mean? And at that point, you're out of ideas. Like Bruce has done everything he's going to do in that franchise, but you're making it because it makes money. And I thought, let me go do something that actually might affect the world in a more powerful, more positive way. And I thought the one thing I did know was engineering. So I was like, let me get back into tech. It'll be a smaller company. It's not going to be hundreds of people working on a movie. It'll be me and a couple people. Tried a couple companies, failed twice. Raised about $6 million. And boy, that was that painful and embarrassing and humiliating, bumping into friends who were like, hey, you left your job at Fox to go do this. How's it going? Terribly. I think we're going to close the company. I suck, Did that. But in the course of doing that, realized how many of the sort of tips and tricks and principles I learned about hybrid work, remote work from film were applicable to this new world where suddenly with the pandemic, like Zoom became a verb. And everyone's trying to figure out, like, how do you be productive working from home? Is it possible? Is it the worst or the best? And that's a lot what I've been sharing, the past couple of years, including building a platform just around that idea of like, how can you have happy productivity? So that's what I
Yeah.
do. I hope that gives a little more color to your intro, which was great.
Yeah. Well, connect the dots for us in terms of the film world, technology, and remote work. What are the lessons you learned that you carried over, the principles that maybe aren't as obvious to those of us that haven't been through those three sectors in the
You know
series
what?
that you've done?
Let me say this is in film for 100 years and in television, in entertainment in general, there has been the entire spectrum of remote, hybrid, in person, whatever you want to call it, distributed work, asynchronous work. Well,
Hmm.
but it's never been called that. But if you
Hmm.
think about it, every film goes from remote work, where it's some writers coming up with ideas, working in their homes, working in their partner's home, their writing buddy's home, working in a coffee shop, right? It's totally remote. At some point, one of those ideas gets some traction, gets a little money behind it, and it's like, oh, let's set up a production office. And you go in 1 or 2 days a week. You meet with the location scout, you meet with the costumer and the production designer. Then you go off and write for a few days, and it's hybrid. Then you're on set. It's $100,000 a day. Everybody's there all day and all night for months, right? And then it goes back to being hybrid. You have picture editors and sound editors working, and then you're remote again. And that entire evolution has never in film been called like, well, the remote period of the film, or the hybrid period of the film. Like, you're in pre-production, you're in post-production, it's things like that. But what's interesting is that because film's been doing it for 100 years, whether you're a leader or whether you're an individual contributor, you kind of know how it works. Like, what are the best practices for, I need to write this. Like, I'm getting paid $150,000 to turn in a draft in 3 weeks. Here is how I will do that, right? And if you're a studio executive or producer or director, you're kind of like, here's how I nurture this team into doing the best part of this stage. So
Yeah.
that is, if that helps ground everything we'll talk about in the next half hour, I hope that helps people go, oh, wow, okay, so film has been doing remote and hybrid and in person and just never calling it that,
Yeah.
you know?
And so, for those that might be aspiring creatives in the film
Yep.
world, what advice would you give them on how to make that work for their vocation,
You
either
know
as
what?
a contributor or a leader?
I tell you this, before I even go into the productivity stuff, I will answer your question, which is the best advice I could give someone who wanted to be a creative, a talent, writer, actor, director, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you this. After 2 decades in film, I met a lot of people very high on the talent spectrum and very high on the tenacious spectrum. And I will tell you at the end of the day, it's the tenacious ones who are still working. I know it sounds terrible, but I'm just going to tell you the data don't lie. If you were able to take no, oh, your audition sucked. Oh, your script is so bad. Whatever it is, like, if you're able to take no, learn something from it and just continue on and go, well, not today, but I'll make it better tomorrow. You'll end up winning far better than someone who's really amazing, but they get the no and they're like, oh, I'm terrible. And they just wither and they move to Pomona and become a real estate agent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
So define for us what you mean by tenacious and
t-
and how you would like
tenacious
describe
means
some of the.
literally that. The ones like there was the Austin Film Festival here, I don't know, a month or 2 months ago. Yeah, there are some old buddies who are in town, and now we're all at the point where we're having premieres of our own movies, sort of thing, right? I went to a couple of those, and I'll tell you, the friends who were having premieres were not the ones that 10, 15 years ago are like, these are the brightest, smartest, most talented, creative people on earth. They were the ones who could get a no. Hey, Jason, I'm passing on your script. I'm not going to buy it. And you as Jason would go like, totally cool, man. Give me one piece of advice. What would have made it better? Oh, well, the character this. Thanks, man. Okay, cool. And then you rewrote it and you took it to the next person. How do I learn from this no and just not let it affect me? That ended up being the people who are at the film festival, and they're at Cannes right now as we record this, which I thought was super interesting. You know,
Yeah. What makes someone tenacious?
to put on the pop psychology hat, which I don't deserve to wear, but having worked with a lot of what I've heard of people, I'll tell you my belief is that it is really about your relationship with your parents. It is about, you have to have somehow this fire put in your belly. It can come from scarcity. It can come from you're just poor. Like both my parents were born in poverty that I do not understand because they worked so hard to make sure I never saw that kind of poverty, you know?
Yeah.
But man, they got where they were because there were questions, will we eat tomorrow in both their lives? I have never had that in my life. That is solely because they worked so hard to make sure I never would wonder that, right? So my tenaciousness does not come from that kind of scarcity. My tenaciousness comes more from when I was little. My mom and dad were like, do something with your life. Like go out there, whatever. My brother's a fantastic pianist, Harvard undergraduate, dual doctorates from Yale, like amazing, speaks classical Latin and Greek and German and French. Like, he's an amazing, but he wasn't raised impoverished. He just had a sense of like, go out there and do something with your life. And that came from our parents, you know? And sometimes it comes from your parents being distant, where you're trying to, prove something and win their love. There are a lot of ways, but I've always seen it come from the parents, a relationship with the parents.
Yeah.
And I'm about to be a parent, as you know, so I'm like thinking about this a lot. How do I raise
Yeah.
healthy kids who do something meaningful in the world?
Yeah. I mean, as parents, we contribute both to the positive and the negative. So,
Right?
we got to brace
You know
yourself
better
from
than
both
I.
sides.
You've got a brood.
Yeah, it's all five. So we do our best and try and maintain the relationship, and then trust that the gaps will be filled.
Yep.
So what is the technology ventures and investment, raising the funds, failing, succeeding? What lessons does that contribute to what you would then later do?
Well, I'll tell you, in the course, when I left Fox, I had two companies in a row that didn't work, right? I'd raised about 3 million for each. And it's probably the hardest part, not probably, the hardest part of acknowledging, we got to 60,000 users, but that's not enough to like really get to a Series A or something, right? Was having to talk to the investors, the people who had believed in me and said, hey man, we're going to take a bet on you. And saying, I think we've tried everything that I can think of. It's not scaling at that rate that we need it to scale. And I don't think we should raise more money because it would just be throwing money away, right? That I felt humiliated. I mean, I had a very successful film career. Everyone's like, oh, what are you going to do next? And I felt ashamed. I sat, both times I did, the most valuable thing I did was I sat while it was still fresh, while those wounds were still painful. I sat in this one chair I have near a window in my place, and I took a legal pad and a pencil, like old school, like my hand is going to write this, not I'm going to dictate it into my Siri or something, right? But I was like, write down right now while it's fresh. What did you do wrong? What would you tell yourself? And I keep those two pieces of paper. I look at them every now and then to make sure I don't screw up. I'll tell you, in both of them, the number one thing was listen.
So you didn't do enough listening?
I think when people, users doing test groups, doing whatever, were trying to tell me like, oh, I know you're aiming at this, but I feel like it should be this. Listening deeply to what they're saying in hindsight would have helped. Now, would it have made, either of those become like the next Google, Instagram, TikTok, OpenAI? Maybe not. But I think it would have bent the curve a bit. So that was a really big one. Now that I've said that, which is my advice to anyone who's had a failure, is like use it as much as you can. Let me share with you some very specific things, because you asked me about technology things that came out of this. So going to two companies I ran that were remote, distributed, whatever you want to call it. After having been at Fox, which is a, in the office day job wearing a suit every day, right? There were a number of things around distractions and focus that I was like, wow, there have to be good solutions to this, because I see it exhibited in myself. I have these problems with it. And some of, my gang, my crew does. How do we solve this? So when I started this company, it was really around this idea of like, what did we learn? Now I'm going to tell you, everything I'm going to share that is helpful came out of either watching people solve it well in the film TV world, or reading some of the great books on productivity, mindfulness, thought, right? So there is not an original idea in here. The thing I offer is I've distilled a lot of it down in a really simple way. And I've also built a platform that for 30 cents a day, you can basically access this. So if you read, Cal Newport's work, especially deep work, if you read, Clear and Near and Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote Flow, if you read like the top 12 books, there's a lot of commonality. They have a different lexicon. Everyone has different words for their, sort of framework that they sell, but there's a lot of commonality around like, here's how you can do things better. I, in reading those, wanted to take that and make it super accessible. And that's basically what I did. So if you have an interest in, I would like to be happier, here's a way of doing it. And I can talk to you about that or wherever you'd like to go with this. But that's why I'm passionate about technology can help us be happier and more productive.
Yeah. Well, let's tease out a few layers there. So you mentioned kind of facing this moment of utter humiliation
Yep.
in the failure.
Yep.
I imagine you raised money for movies that also failed. So is that true? And what was the difference between those failed movies and this failure technology company?
You know what? I don't think I raised money for movies that failed because most of the movies I did were studio movies. So they're not like indie films where we have to go raise like $3 million to make a movie. The movies I did, you could only make at a studio that had billions of dollars to blow every year on production and, advertising.
Got it.
So I
So
worked
would you
on
say
two.
that the failure for those movies looked different, but it wasn't necessarily like it may not have been as successful as you wanted, would have been considered a failure
Oh yeah, I mean, I
or
worked on some
profitable?
movies that were stinkers. Don't get me wrong, right?
Yeah.
But there's so many people involved. There are literally hundreds of people involved that the director may get some blame. The lead actor, if he or she sort of, opened the movie better, they get a lot of blame. It's not quite the same as when you have a small company with like, 5, 10, 15 people. You go sit with people, have lunches and dinners, explain them what you want to do, get their money, and then, 2, 3 years later, like it didn't work. That was painful,
So
especially
wearing the
when you know
burden,
them.
yeah,
After a couple of years, like you talk to them every week or two, like you're engaged with them and you're like, I failed you and I feel really bad.
yeah. So if it felt so bad, I imagine in a way it might have even felt like a death of sorts.
Yeah.
Um, how how did you move through that? Like imagine someone is in that place right now. What would you like they're feeling those things. How would you help them process those feelings?
I'm glad you asked that because there are a couple things that I do. These may not be universally helpful, but I'll tell you they've helped me. One thing
Yeah.
I told you, which was, hey, I'm going to make use of this. This was a lesson. It was a painful one, but rather than just let the pain go by, what did I learn and write it out? So that's number one, right?
Mhm.
Number two, and it's going to sound somewhat comedic, but I realized at a certain point that it was like, the world ain't going to end. And I probably cared more than other people did. Like enough of my investors, like when I closed my first company that didn't work, all my investors, except for one dude, all my investors, the thing they asked me back, and I'm like, Jason, I'm so sorry. Like, we've tried this, we've tried that. You're going to lose your $150,000. I'm really sorry. Right. All of them except one said, well, what do you want to do next? Like, we saw what you did for 2 years. This didn't work. Like, let us know if you have another idea, which to me was astonishing. There was one guy who had put in $10,000 into one of my companies, and he was like, I'm so upset. I was like, I tried really hard. I lost, $500,000 of my own money, dude. Like you put in
Yeah.
10,000, right? So that was interesting to me to learn, like, you probably feel the pain more than other people, assuming you have not killed someone. Like I'm going to say short of something shocking like that. But if you have a failure in business or whatever, you probably feel it worse. The bottom is not as low as you think it is. And also it kind of frees you up in a way because now you're like, well, what do I want to do?
And I think there's an interesting dynamic there in terms of like you thought the world was coming to an end and it was
Yep.
just the beginning.
Yep. Very true. There you go. There's a lesson in all this stuff.
Yeah. So how do you evolve into this productivity virtual work from the technology season? So you've gone from film to
Mhm.
technology to now you're in a like whole different bucket of things. So they asked you what's next. What was next?
Yeah. Well, here's something that I'll tell you that's a very interesting experience for me, which is the first time I experienced a flow state. And I'll explain what that is for any listeners who don't know already. I'll explain that in a moment. But I was on a flight from Austin to SF, going to meet my team. On the flight, I had to do some designs or something in Figma. And it was an American flight, I think, or Alaska, and the Wi-Fi was out. And I remember we took off, and I started working, and we landed, and I was like, "What happened? Like we must have landed in Dallas. Like something's horribly wrong with the flight because we just took off." And I looked down, and 2 hours and 40 minutes had gone by. I had no concept of that. I hadn't fidgeted. I hadn't gone to the bathroom. I don't even know if the drink cart came around, but my designs were done. And I got off the plane, and there's actually a New England lobster roll place that's near SFO that I'd love to go. And I thought to myself, I can actually go there and be relaxed and have a Connecticut lobster roll instead of rushing to the hotel to be like, well, I got to finish these before the team meeting in the morning. It was like, they're done. And that
Yeah.
I didn't know what it was called, but that was a flow state. You get in this like highly concentrated state. You're very productive. You're not distracted. And when you're done, you're like, oh, wow, I did really good work. And in less time than I thought. Well, that was kind of cool, right? Now, this, of course, makes me almost embarrassed to say it, but that's a pretty well-known thing in the productivity community. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi wrote about this. His book was called Flow. He named it a flow state because he was studying there are all these high performers in different disciplines, athletes, artists, they get in this highly concentrated state. They do amazing work, blah, blah, blah. And it seems very common the way they talk about it. Like there's that great Michael Jordan quote about when he's in the zone. Like he calls it the zone, not flow state, right? He's like in the zone. And it was just him and the ball. And there's a great Picasso quote about how he's up all night and he didn't, pee, didn't go drink anything or eat dinner, he forgot whatever. But then he created this amazing artwork. And it's just like, I didn't realize it was dawn, right? And so Mihai wrote about how there's a certain point where it's not just, it seems like your own effort that's carrying you forward, but it's almost like you're on a river that's like carrying you and magnifying your ability. And he named the book Flow. And it's thanks to him we have that term. So the answer to your question is that's a very powerful, interesting phenomenon. And I was noticing working in remote companies, even with some of my ex-founders and partners and stuff, that this was super valuable because it's really distracting. And if you'd like, I can talk about some specific problems that I've had and others have had that we worked backwards to address.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'll tell you one, and I'm guilty as sin of this. I'm a procrastinator, right? I call it the cold start problem in the morning.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I'm going to get up at X time. I'm going to get back from the gym and start work at 8:30 or 9, whatever. And I would end up like wasting half an hour, sort of like, oh, I should check my emails, or I'd scroll through the news or do something. And I wouldn't actually start on time. I was half an hour off. And I dug into that. I was like, what am I doing? You know what it is? I was procrastinating. I was not actually, oh, I have to put in this load of laundry. I'm at home. It'll be great. I'm multitasking while I get my work done. No, it was just procrastinating, right? And it generally, and I'm talking to hundreds of our members now in the Sukha to really understand, well, what do you do? Why do you do that? Well, why do you do that? Well, why do you feel that way? And here's what it usually comes down to in this case is it is overwhelming. It is either looking at a task list that has 17 things on it and you're like, I will never get this done, paralyzed even looking at how long this thing is, right? Or it's overwhelmed, but there's something on there. There is no way in hell you're going to get done today. Oh, write my book. You're not going to write your book before 11 a.m., your Zoom meeting today. You know what I mean? And so we thought about that and we said, okay, how would we address that to make this a beautiful experience? So I'll tell you what we did. This is going to sound super simple, but I'll tell you how effective it is in our platform, which is just a website. You just go to the website, log in, blah, blah, right? When you start your session, there's a smart assistant that helps you. It says, let me help set up your task for the day. Picks 3 things, no more than 3, that go in your this session little bucket, right? That's visible to you. So when you start, all your task list is hidden except for 3 things that you agreed with your assistant. These are important. I need to do these now, right? I will tell you, when we changed from, hey, you can see your whole task list to you can see up to 3, there was a 77% better chance that that member will finish all 3 than there was the exact same session, the same time, the same kind of tasks where they could see 17. Because the paralysis and the confusion of what should we work on goes away. That was a really simple thing, just clean and easy, right? You were about to say something, weren't you?
Yeah, well, a couple parallels. So I wrote my first book, Path of the Freelancer, somewhere around here. And I talk about how essentially my task was write an hour every day.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't even have to be that. It could be, my friend Denise Renee says, write 15 minutes a day.
Yep.
And that just feels a lot less overwhelming than writing a book. If your to-do is to write a book. And so slicing it into the specific action can make it really helpful. And the other thing that comes to mind is just like doing YouTube and podcasts and these things is I know all the steps of the process. So like this particular interview, once we're done, I use Evernote and I have folders for each step.
Hmm.
So I'll just move the Steven Puri episode from my Evernote to record it to the editing it. And so when I'm in the editing mode, I just, okay, what's the next thing I need to edit? I see this episode, I go and I do it, and then I do the next one, and then I might batch them. But it's just taking the thinking out of it. And that's one
Yes,
of the things when I was a
completely
freelancer,
agree
when I
with you.
started, is I did all the thinking about how I wanted to go about freelancing before, in the first few months. So then I could just act and I didn't have to think anymore. And it's the thinking that I found that is a lot of what slows us down. So what do you say about all that?
Jason, I couldn't agree more. And I'll tell you this, one of the other things that our smart assistant does is when it sees you do something like write my book, 18 hours, 4,000 hours, it will stop you and say, hey, you know what? That's a good goal. Probably not achievable this morning. What if we were to say, just outline chapter 3 today? Because I know yesterday you did chapter 2. And then you're like, oh yeah, I can do chapter 3. I had that idea when I was showering this morning. Okay, you know what? I can do that. And it suddenly becomes achievable where you start to get stuff done, and that momentum carries you through the day.
Yeah. And I think we we underappreciate how much friction stops us from doing things.
Yep.
So talk to us about that.
Agreed. So I will tell you, let us say, if we're going to use, fluid dynamics and physics and stuff, there's like friction, there's fluidity, there's lubrication, all that, right? So when you do read, the books by the smart people about what conditions precedents sort of lead to flow states, right?
Yeah.
So one of them is a way to block out distractions. And music is very common with that. Like you're wearing actually really nice headphones right now. And so we studied that. And there's enough research that points to, hey, you know what? For most people, 60 to 90 beats per minute, certain key signatures, ambient, non-vocal, melodic music really helps you get lulled into that flow state. We all have the friend that has to listen to death metal or 90s gangster rap, whatever it is. Like we all have that outlier friend, right? That's how they do it.
Yeah, yeah.
But for most people, that's true. So one of the things we did, because again, I have a bunch of friends who are film composers that have time on their hands, was we packaged into Sukha over 1,000 hours of flow music designed to these practices that science says is kind of here. We did that. Super fun. There's upbeat, down tempo, there's lo-fi, there's a whole bunch of stuff, right? And then some members said, well, I actually love X, Y, and Z. And X, Y, and Z were almost like ambient soundscapes. They weren't really like music. They're like, oh, you like this lake cabin nearby. Oh, okay. How would we make that? So we ended up launching these naturescapes where one of our sound engineers was in Kathmandu and it rained.
Okay.
He pulled out his mic and he recorded 2 hours of rain in the Himalayas. We made that a playlist. If you want to listen to rain in the Himalayas, there's a lake, Emerald Lake up near Banff. And one of our engineers is up there. If you want to listen to the birds of Emerald Lake, you can do that. If you want to listen to a coffee shop in Vienna, Austria, we have a couple hours of a coffee shop, because some people, especially writers I know, love working in coffee shops. So we created a bunch of those. So to answer your question, sometimes there's just that, the way you get over the friction is just being in an environment that is like almost like lubricated to keep you moving forward so you don't get stuck with the friction. Those are just a couple of thoughts.
Yeah. So let's talk about the flip side. So it's May 20th, and in 2 days, I have tickets to go see the new Mission Impossible movie.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I really want to see it. And so there's a lot of friction to get there. I have a wife, 5 kids. I have to get all my friends on the board. We have to buy our tickets. We got to show up. There's a lot of friction, but
Yep.
there's something about that task that the friction becomes, it doesn't stop me, right? So talk to me about that dynamic.
Okay. Can I tell you why we named my company this weird ass name?
Yeah, go ahead.
So in early version of this, we knew we had to come up with a permanent title for it, right? And we had people using it. And it was around the time that Laura and I got married. I'm very grateful. We got to go to Bali. We both practice yoga. So we had to go to Bali for like 10 days. It's like
What year was that?
2 or 3 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that. So we were going there. And I said to Laura, I've been struggling with every bad name for this company. If you want a bad name, I've got like focus flow state, distraction app 14. Like just terrible stuff, right? Embarrassing how bad the names were. And I was struggling with this. And I said, you know what? Maybe this is the gift from the universe. For 10 days, no one's going to bug me about the PO for the staplers we have to order or changing the AWS settings. Like no one's going to bug me because like Puri's on his honeymoon, leave him alone, right? So I'm like, maybe the universe will just let my unconscious mind bubble up something that's not obvious. You know, when you think about like, what did Amazon have to do with books? You know, Nike with shoes, you know, like some of these words where you're like, oh, it's not the obvious flow state app, you know?
Yeah.
And Laura's like, okay, that's cool. That'd be great. You know, we'll be doing some yoga in this meeting. So I said, I'd love on the first day, what if I spoke to a couple of our power members and asked them like what they love about what we're doing? Because maybe that will seed my unconscious mind with like, oh, here's the vibe of what we're doing, right? So she's like, go for it. I'm going to the pool. I will see you at dinner. Right? So I sat in a little hotel room and I asked a couple of members, would you chat for 10 minutes? We did. We chat all three of them in a row. And at the end of the third one, it was like 8 minutes in, sort of wrapping up. And I was like, oh, Jason, thank you so much for your time. This has been really, valuable today. And it's been kind of okay. And he said to me, you didn't ask the right question. And I was like, okay, what was the right question? He said, you should ask me why I pay you. And I was like, it's 30 cents a day. It hadn't even really occurred to me that's a big deal. We try to make it affordable for everyone, like students included. And he was like, so at 3:00, I can be playing with my kids. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. Or at 6:00, I can be down on myself and say, where the hell did the day go? So the difference is, did I open your app in the morning? My kids are not going to be 2 and 4 forever. I pay you for those 3 hours, for the memories that I get with them in that time. Okay, thank you. So I go to dinner with Laura. I'm like, I spoke to this guy who is more articulate about my company than I am. This is what he said. And Laura's like, wow, that's really good, So we had a little dinner. We're brushing our teeth, going to bed. And Laura looks at me. She goes, in yoga, we hear all those like yoga terms. Like, oh, your karma, satya and dharma and, all that kind of stuff, right? She said, what he described to you is sukha. Like that happiness, that self-fulfillment. When you're like good at what you do, you feel comfortable doing what you do. That's what he's trying to tell you, is he pays you to feel that way. You've been looking at the productivity tools, but for you, they're really just like the stones on the path. They're like the paving stones. He's trying to tell you the goal is sukha. And I was like, wow. And from bed in Bali on our honeymoon, I bought the website, the Sukha company, because I wanted to be called the happiness company.
Yeah. So what does it mean to be in that state of sukha in your life and in your work?
It means feeling in control, that you're being intentional, And there are many ways to be productive. You can beat yourself up. You can stay up all night. Like there's a badge of honor, in Silicon Valley or often in banking or in film. It's like, I was up until 4 a.m. coding, whatever. It's like, okay, cool, man. If that's how you do, you do. I'm not living your life. You live your life. But suppose, for example, you could be hyper productive in a healthy way and get that done by like 4 p.m. instead of being like at 4 a.m. like, oh, I'm so tough and good. Yeah, you know what? You just be intentional, be in control of your life. And that means less time screwing around in TikTok or Insta or whatever, your vice is. Less time opening a YouTube video and looking up and realize you watched 3 YouTube videos when you only needed to watch the one that had the thing you were looking for. And that's, I think, what Sukha is saying like, hey, I want to be in control of my life. And what that guy told me, I pay you. So at 3:00, I'm with my kids and they're not going to be 2 and 4 forever.
Yeah. So, well, 2 things. One, the legal entity for my company is called prothesios, which is a Greek word for intentional.
Very cool. I did not know that. My hat is off to you.
So that's a similar type of
There's a reason we're here. See that?
What's keeping people from moving? Like, maybe this is a good way to ask it. I think what you're trying to do is help people avoid the distractions.
Yep.
And move towards what they actually value. And spending time with the kids in that case, instead of wasting 4 hours watching reels on Instagram, he's spending 4 hours with his kids, right?
Yep.
So talk to us about distractions.
Listen, let me be super blunt. It is a war. It is literally a war. What you were talking about is, oh, you know what? I would like to see my kids grow up and I like to be present with my husband or my wife or be part of my surf club or whatever it is, right? And on the other side of that is exactly what you said. Well, I could, watch another reel. Just, 5 more minutes.
Yeah.
And
And
let's
they've
be,
removed all the friction.
yeah, and
They've
let's be
removed
super
all of
clear.
it.
The best designers, the best engineers in the world make the most amount of money working for the companies that steal your life.
Yeah.
Period. Full stop.
Yeah.
You want to go
I
work
often
for
think,
Zuck? You will, if you can find some way to get 1 second more of time on site across 1 billion people, Zuck will make you rich. Your children's children will never need to work. Try to do that designing like, faucets in, some plumbing company. No.
yeah,
So you have that across those companies that basically say, listen, man, we steal people's lives. We sell them to advertisers. We keep the money. They get nothing, but they get to scroll. That is the other side of that war. And you have the smartest people in the world on that side trying to steal your life. If you want to do that, go for it. Let them steal your life. Let them sell it to advertisers. But if you're like, you know what, I actually like to be part of my life. I like to be part of my family. We offer you a tool to do that. You got to be intentional. You got to want it.
yeah. So let's talk to me about mentoring. How does mentoring play a role in all of this?
Dude, I'm a huge fan of that. I've both mentored and been a mentee. And if you have a clear sense of where you're going and you can pick someone who has been down that road, absolutely do it. Period. And you'll make some of the same mistakes. It is just that thing of like raising children. I'm sure like there's some mistakes you realize they just need to make for themselves. You can tell them as much as you want. They're going to make that mistake. Your mentor will recognize that about you. And at some point as a mentee, you'll recognize like, oh yeah, God, if I just listened to that, I wouldn't have done this. But you just got to do it. So get around people who have done what you want to do and just absorb it. Keep your mouth shut. Work hard. Like make yourself valuable and be in the room. 100%. Yes.
Yeah. And where did systems play a role?
Well, I think there are a lot of people who speak very well about systems. I would not say that I am the guru on systems. There are smart guys and girls you could have on your podcast that can talk about that better than I. I know that my life is made up of systems, but largely designed based upon, reading and watching people talk about like, here's a way to organize your life. Here's a way to organize your thought. Happily now with the way both, LLMs work and, semantic search and search in general, you have the ability to find a lot of, if you want to know something, you have an ability to find it now, which is really beautiful.
Yeah. So what would you say is the difference between a healthy ecosystem and a toxic, tyrannical system?
I would say I have a fundamental belief that inside all of us, there is some great thing that could get out. In this lifetime, we may get it out of ourselves, we may not. The great systems are the ones that find that enable people to find it inside themselves and get it out in a way that's healthy. And the ones that are not either don't get that thing out of you or they do it by beating you to death.
Yeah, keeping it from ever coming out.
Yeah, or getting it out of you, but you're just discarded.
It's exploiting you for that thing. Yeah. Now, talk to us about, we kind of started talking about your movie history, movie studio history. Talk to us about stories and narratives and how have they shaped you as a person and how do they play a part in all of this?
One of my friends is called the Pitch Whisperer, and he and I used to work together in film. He now counsels the largest architectural firm in the world on how to tell stories. And he is very articulate about, the power of story. The same way, if you ever take, Bob McKee's class in filmmaking or storytelling, like there's some people who are just very clear, not just on how to tell a story, but also the importance of stories, because stories are really how we learn, I mean, you can learn 2 + 2 = 4 just by rote. But if you want to actually deeply learn how the world works, it's about stories. And it's about stories as simple as, how did, the Tom Sawyer Huck Finn thing work? Why did they paint the fence? How did he get them to do that? Well, let me tell you a story about how that happened. Or it could be something about, well, what happened with Nixon? And why did Mao do this? And when you really uncover those stories, you're like, there is a hero. There is a heroic force. Doesn't have to be noble, but a heroic force. There is an opposition. And there is a battle. Someone's going to win or lose. It can be success or tragedy. But that is how we learn, by crafting the events around us into that kind of narrative. So if you learn that skill, how to tell a story, it's going to serve you your whole life.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite movies, shows, books,
I'll tell you someone that
stories?
people don't quote a lot anymore. Um, I'll tell you there is an old action adventure movie that Steven and George made called Raiders of the Lost Ark that spawned this Indiana Jones franchise. And I'll tell you, it gets lumped in with a lot of action adventure movies. But I'll tell you, if you really understand storytelling, you realize that it stands out in a huge way. The character work is so extraordinary in it. I will tell you some things that are true about it that are not true of any other movie that I know. And I've seen a lot of movies. Number one, after you watch the movie, ask yourself the question, what if the hero had never been born? Would the movie end any differently? The answer is no. The hero has no effect on the plot. And yet, you love the hero. They made God knows how many sequels to it. The character you love being with, but the hero does nothing to actually affect the movie. You just love being with him. And to top that off, in every one of those movies, and I've developed a number of them and seen a lot of them, you set up in the first act, hey, you know, in this movie, Jason Montoya knows how to shoot arrows better than anyone else. So in the first act, there's a shot of Jason with his best friend at the arrow range, at the archery range, shooting arrows. You're like, okay, we set up, he's really good. And guess what? In the third act, Jason's gonna have to shoot that arrow right through the narrow thing, 4,000 yards to kill the dragon while the spaceship lands and the aliens plant the bomb. You know, I think that's right. Always. Climax of Raiders of the Lost Ark. The hero is tied to a stake, cannot move. And yet what he does completely pays off the movie. Name another action film where the hero takes no action, and yet you're like, hell yeah. But it's just a dumb action adventure movie until you look under the hood and you're like, wow. So yeah, there are other great movies people cite all the time. Like Godfather 1 is amazing, 3 is amazing, like I remember 2 is amazing. You know, the Bourne movies like Casablanca, like other great ones. But that no one quotes that, so I'm just gonna blow a little sunshine its way.
Yeah, yeah. What additional words of wisdom do you have for us? Any stories, anything you want to share with us so you didn't get a chance to do so yet?
You know what? I would say this. If there is one additional productivity practice that has helped me that we didn't touch upon in any way, right? It is focus time. It is if you create this for yourself and you set up boundaries, or you're a team leader and you set this up for your team to really be in a flow state, to do the work that moves your life forward or the life of your company forward. It's not done in like 30 minutes in between Zooms. You do
Yeah.
nothing really of value in between Zooms. You do it when you block out 2 or 3 hours. You go, I'm going to go deep on this thing, and you can't be interrupted. You can't be like responding to Slacks and trying to be present. So if you have that and you say, you know what, hey guys, I'm blocking my calendar 9 to 11 every morning. That's where I'm going to do the work where I ain't going to talk to you, but I will move the company forward. We will find the feature that is going to change the trajectory of our company, or I'm going to write the book that's going to launch my career. I'm going to do the thing, right? You got to make the commitment to yourself, defend the time. And if you're a leader, create that opportunity for the people. Say, hey guys, you know, if this works for you, figure out your chronotype. Maybe you're 9 to 11 in the morning. Maybe you're 3 to 5 in the afternoon. Maybe you're 6 o'clock at night, whatever your chronotype says. But I support you in that. And I will not expect you to reply. If I Slack you like, hey, Jason, where's the so-and-so, the TPS report? Don't reply for 2 hours. I get it. Because you're doing something way more important than digging the TPS report out of Teams or something, you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that is my best advice, is find those windows and guard them with your life.
yeah. How can people connect with you? How can they learn more about your app?
Oh, super simple to connect with me. Um, if anyone has any questions, I'm super available. Like I'm totally down if it's like, I want to know more about that Cal Newport book, or I want to know more about this, whatever it is, like reach out to me, Steven at the Sukha.co. I will respond. It may not be a 19 paragraph story of my life, but I try to respond to every email unless I'm traveling or sick that day. So
Okay.
happy to do that. And if you're interested in being part of the community and, you know, productivity and cool crowd, 7-day free trial of our app. No credit card, no BS. Just try it. If
Okay.
you dig it, sign up. If you don't, we'll never bug you again.
Web based.
Web-based, just runs in your browser. Sukha.co, Sukha.co. You can put it in the show notes and just type it in your browser, hit enter. All you need is your email address. You're in.
Okay. And who's a good fit for that to use that?
People who work remotely that want to focus, generally our population is engineers, writers, designers, attorneys, accountants, people like that that work from home and like have a couple hours of knowledge work, and they're like, I could do this in 6 or I could do it in 3. I'd like to do it in 3.
Well, I appreciate, Steven, you sharing your life with us today.
Jay, it was awesome. Thank you so much. I hope this is helpful for somebody out there.
Thank you so much. This has been another episode of the Share Life Podcast. I'm Jason Scott Montoya, and we'll see you on the next one.